Hello, friends. It's Pastor Alex back with another mini worship service today. And I thought after some of our discussions this week, we did an open format. Come with your questions about faith or church or history in general. And we had several conversations that reminded me of a story in the Bible that I thought I'd share. This is from Genesis 32, and just a little bit of background about it. Uh, if you don't remember the story of Jacob, and particularly Jacob and Esau, and Jacob and Laban, and all of those things, it's really worth looking back at. There's a rich story and a rich history there about the descendants of Abraham who carried the promise and carried the promise of God to a new generation. And so in Genesis 32, we pick up the story with Jacob, who is leaving from Lebanon, where he had been in a kind of an exile after he had to flee from his brother Esau. And he's gotten married, and he has acquired a lot of wealth and a lot of animals, and he has all of these possessions, and he's headed back to his ancestral homeland. And he doesn't know how his brother Esau, whom he had betrayed, is going to react to seeing him again. Anyone here ever been nervous going to a family reunion? Well, how about a family reunion years later after you cheated your brother out of his birthright? So Jacob is nervous, but God has given him a sign that it's time to return, and so he's headed back to the land of his ancestors. And on that journey full of worry, he pauses, and our story picks up here. But during the night he got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 maidservants, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He got them safely across the brook along with all his possessions. But Jacob stayed behind himself, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he couldn't get the best of Jacob as they wrestled, he deliberately threw Jacob's hip out of joint. The man said, "Let me go. It's daybreak." Jacob said, "I'm not letting you go till you bless me." The man said, "What's your name?" He answered, "Jacob." The man said, "But no longer. Your name is no longer Jacob. From now on, it's Israel. You've wrestled with God and you've come through." Jacob asked, "And what's your name?" The man said, "Why do you want to know my name?" And then, right then and there, he blessed him. Jacob named the place Peniel, or God's face, because he said, "I saw God face to face and lived to tell the story." The sun came up as he left Peniel, limping because of his hip. And there ends the reading. Very strange story, isn't it, the first time you hear it? The story of a man that just appears in the midst of this long-term drama that's going on, and yet Jacob somehow knows that there's something bigger at play, and he ends up wrestling with this man by himself in the midst of the wilderness, not quite crossing the river to get to where he wants to go, and somehow Jacob knows that there's this bigger thing happening. And as he wrestles with him all night long, and it's about to be daybreak, the man, the angel of the Lord, the presence of God in his life, says it's time to leave. And as it's time to leave, Jacob says, "I will not let you go without a blessing." And in the process of the man leaving, he hurts Jacob, leaving him with this limping hip, and still finds a blessing for him, gives him a blessing that not only is just a new name, but the name that would become the name of the nation to this day of Israel. One who wrestled with God and was not overcome. Very strange story. If you don't know how the story turns out, of course, they are more or less reconciled, and the story continues that there is a blessing that comes to Jacob, and the line continues all the way through Christ, and by the power of Christ, that promise of God and covenant comes to each and every one of us. But I wonder if sometimes the strangeness of some of these Old Testament stories, we just want to write them off before really considering them. And the consideration is, of course, who here hasn't wrestled with some of these big questions? Who hasn't wrestled with wondering where God is in the midst of the coronavirus, or where God might be at play in some of the painful things that we've been through in our lives? Who hasn't wrestled with God and not understanding where there is truth and purpose, and where there might be a different way of approaching the same problem that we seem to struggle with over the course of our lives? All of us have these moments where we struggle. And sometimes you'd swear, as Christians, we are told to only have faith and don't have any doubt at all, when I don't know that that's honest to most of our experiences. I think, and I believe, that there is a greater truth in this struggle, this process, where sometimes, even in the midst of our pain, where we might end up even seeming a bit injured, that there's a greater blessing that comes that can transform us. And I would invite us to consider the places in our lives where we found the most transformation might well be the places where we've overcome the most. So I don't know what you're struggling with today. I don't know what angels of the Lord you might be struggling with, or what doubts or fears you might be struggling with, or what financial issues you might be struggling with. But I trust and believe that with God's power and by the leading of God's Spirit, there will be a blessing that's coming bigger than you can possibly imagine. And as Jacob walked away a little bit wounded, so we might walk away not knowing exactly what's happening or what's up. But without this moment at Peniel, where Jacob saw God face to face, we would not have had the story, all the stories that led the way up to the Bible's climax with Christ in our lives. And it's on the cross and in the resurrection that we see truly that God not only will lead us through these struggles, but came to live with us and be a part of those struggles with us, and that anything that we have to face, Christ has faced before, even up to and including death itself. And that in the resurrection, in the empty tomb, we see a doorway to a new way of life. Not just for after we die, but also for here and now, that we can live differently, and we have that ultimate promise that there is a greater purpose at play, that God can bring blessing even from pain, and ultimately that there's so much more to our lives than what meets the eye if we will just take enough time to be aware that God's beside us. Why don't I sing... This is another Taizé chant. It's, O Lord, hear my prayer. It is pretty straightforward and simple, but I'm going to try to sing it for us today. O Lord, hear my prayer. O Lord, hear my prayer. When I call, answer me. O Lord, hear my prayer. O Lord, hear my prayer. Come and listen to me. The Lord is my song. The Lord is my praise. All my hope comes from God. The Lord is my song. The Lord is my praise. God, the wellspring of life. And I hope and trust today that God will indeed find you and bring you a great wellspring of life, and that you will find reasons for praise and for joy and for celebration, and that in the midst of the struggles of your life, that there might be some kind of blessing that comes to you even amidst the pains that you might be going through. So may God bless you and keep you. May you encounter God in your life, and may you wrestle with these big questions and receive a blessing. And may you know always and forevermore, God loved you so much to send Christ to be your Savior and to bring you home. So be at peace and know this, you belong to God.